Welcome to the Numbers Game, the show where analytics meets the action and data drives the decisions. I'm Cynthia Freeland, and it's March Madness, baby. I know I've been at the NFL Network for 9 seasons now, but don't you worry, I have maintained my men's hoops model. I love college basketball. I grew up in East Lansing, for goodness sake, and I really love the tournament. One shining moment, it never gets old. I kicked the rust off the model this week and ran 15,000 simulations for each and every game, and I'm going to share my results with you here today. Unlike my NFL model, I've added a lot more volatility on purpose. This means I've added risk because NCAA picks, unlike NFL picks, there's a lot more risk involved. So I'm going to share where the volatility is, where I'm taking a calculated risk, where I've programmed the model to actually pick the underdog. Of course, I have to make it a little weird. But here's the thing. The best part about these tournament picks, we can play against each other. I am going to put up a link on all the socials, in the comments, etc. But let's play on ncaa.com together in our numbers game group. I've already created it. There's a password, capital N, capital G, 2025. Again, all of those notes will be in the comments on all the different ways that we link to this. But play with me and try out your strategies for your volatility and which picks you like to be upset. If you were to just flip a coin, meaning assigning equal value to each outcome in each tournament game, so each team either wins or loses 2 outcomes, the chances of picking a perfect bracket are 1 in 9.2 quintillion. That's why no one has done it. The NCAA and most outlets agree that if you know something about picking brackets, your odds are about 1 in 120.2 billion. My guess is they're using like Vegas odds as the weighting here, but who cares? Let's just go with it. The point is that when you blend the art and science of data, you can really improve your chances, which is the whole point of this show. Fun fact, the tournament has been played since 1939, but we've really only been picking brackets since 1977, according to the Smithsonian. That first happened in a bar in Staten Island. Only 88 people were in the pool. Can you imagine? We would have such a good edge against those people with all the data we know now. Anyways, if you're looking for some great publicly available data, check out KenPom.com. If you don't know who Ken Pomeroy is, do yourself a favor. Check out all the ways he takes offensive and defensive efficiency, pace, strength of schedule, all of those things kind of together to create these rankings. They're incredible. I incorporate some of them into my models. I also think of all of the stuff as like ingredients in a recipe. So if you want to go look at your own ingredients to make your own recipe, that's a great place to go. Ed Fang, our friend, you remember him from our NCAA football show. He has great stuff too. His picks at the power rank are something like 70.4%. And by the way, he bases them on margin of victory and adjusted strength of schedule. So all good stuff. Okay, I could go on forever about data. Let's get to picking. I'm going to spend a little more time on the round of 64 and then just give some general notes for the rest of it. You'll see why here in a second. Let's start in the East. The strongest team in the field this season in my model is Duke. KenPom says they are the 3rd best on offense and 4th best on defense. Cooper Flagg suffered an ankle injury, and even though I've coded with him playing, I did not assume that he'd be 100%. Flagg leads the Blue Devils in points per game, just under 19, rebounds with 7.5, and assists at 4.1. He also drives a big part of Duke's defensive efficiency. So in my estimate, he's 80%. And if I did that wrong, that could be a problem. But you know what isn't a problem? Duke's odds of beating either American or Mount St. Mary's. Remember, the play-in games haven't happened as of the time of this recording. Only 2 of them have. The Tuesday night ones have. My first toss-up pick, the 8-seed Mississippi State Bulldogs against the 9-seed Baylor Bears. My model gives a very slight edge to the Bulldogs, but it's under 1 point. As an FYI, Mississippi State is being favored by 1.5 points. The Bulldogs are being treated as underdogs in the betting markets, meaning as of now, the crowd is on Baylor's side, which, combined with my model's result, tips the scales for my pick to be Mississippi State. Our first 12-5 matchup. Since 1985, the 12 seed has upset the 5 seed 35.3% of the time, and all 4 of the 5 seeds have only all moved on 6 times. That's pretty bananas. I say that because Liberty, the 12 seed here, faces Oregon, the 5 seed, and this one has some interesting volatility. The line is 6 points in the Ducks' favor as of now, but Liberty earns a high percentage of their points from 3-point shooting, which is a fun way to add to volatility, so it could go one way or the other. While my model does have Oregon winning, this is a risk moment, and I'm going with the Flames. The Ducks have a better chance of beating Arizona, obviously, but slightly. They've seen them before, so that's part of why. So if you really are looking for like crazy upsets, you could factor that in, but I'm going with Liberty. Arizona over Akron is next. This is one of the more lopsided ones for me in this whole round. My model is very high on the Wildcats. So in other words, part of why I'm so comfortable picking Liberty is because I don't think Oregon could beat Arizona either way. So either way, I'm just getting one wrong. Anyways, long story short, we're moving on. The 6 versus 11 here is BYU against VCU. BYU is favored by only 3.5 points. And since 1985, 39.1% of the 11 seeds have knocked off the 6. But since 2016, the 11 seeds have actually won more games than the 6 seed. They've gone 18-14. Also, at least one 11 seed has won in this round in every tournament since 2005. VCU's defense drives the upset here for me. BYU is good on offense, but they have some negative free throw data that dings them. I have VCU winning in my model outright too, so I'm not even relying on risk this time. On Wisconsin over Montana in the 3 versus 14, and St. Mary's over Vandy in the 7 and 10 matchup, and to round it out, Alabama and their high possession, meaning fast-paced play style over Robert Morris. Moving to the Midwest, slot Houston into the round of 32. Same thing with Gonzaga over Georgia, though I do want to give Georgia credit for beating both St. John's and Florida this season. However, the Zags have the biggest disparity over the Bulldogs, not just of any 8 seed over a 9, but they also have better odds to win their round of 64 game than any of the 7, 6, or 5 seeds. Remember, just one game. Clemson, Purdue, and Illinois are all winners in this round in over 65% of each of their game simulations, and Kentucky is well over 81%. I do want to point out that Purdue's opponent, High Point, has only lost 5 of their games this season, and they only lost by a combined 23 points. They're also on a roll of winning 14 straight games. Clemson faces McNeese, who has only lost 1 game since December 14th. UCLA is a 7 seed and faces Utah State, who's the 10. Fun note, Utah State is appearing in their 3rd consecutive tournament with 3 different coaches. UCLA is my pick here, and then Tennessee as the 2 over Wofford. Let's head down south next. Auburn makes the 3rd number 1 seed to win in my estimations, but the 8-9 matchup here is more interesting. Louisville is the 8 and Creighton the 9. Louisville returns to the dance after 5 seasons of missing out, and they have a lot of guards. Creighton's got a special defender in Ryan Kalkbrenner. I'm going with smart risk here, picking Creighton despite my model having a 1-point win for Louisville. UCSD feels like a sexy upset pick over Michigan in the 12 and 5 matchups, but it's actually my 2nd most likely 5 seed to win, despite UCSD coming off 15 straight wins and U of M on shorter rest. Of all the 4 and 13 matchups since 1985, only 21.2% of the underdogs have won. However, Yale has one of those wins, and it was last year over Auburn. Texas A&M does have some weaknesses. They are sub 70% from the line. They're very generous to opposing 3-point shooters to the tune of like 34%. And Yale is good from beyond the arc, about 40%. However, my model says the Aggies being top 3 in both rebounds and second chance shots gives them the edge. UNC made some headlines. Oh, their basketball team made some headlines as being a controversial pick, but my model does not care anything about who's a bubble, who shouldn't be, whatever. I have them advancing over Ole Miss as the 11 seed. Then I have a little bit more chalk with Iowa State, and I'm taking Shaka Smart's Marquette squad that does not turn the ball over to top New Mexico, along with Tom Izzo's Michigan State Spartans over Bryant. Which brings us to the West. I think the majority of brackets will have Duke and Florida when all is said and done, and for good reason. But we are still on the round of 64, so slot in Florida and move on. UConn and Oklahoma is an interesting 8 versus 9, with the Sooners having gone 13-0 in non-conference play. I don't have either team with close enough odds to top Florida in the round of 32, so this one is just flip a coin. I'm going straight model here, no risk adjustment, and saying Huskies. Memphis and Colorado State is a weirdo game, as the 12 seed Colorado State is favored over Memphis, who's the 5 seed. My model has the Rams in 67% of sims. It also appears the public is backing the Tigers, which makes me happy to find a place to be smartly different. Colorado State it is. I have Maryland over Grand Canyon, but this one is closer than the 10.5 point line. I also have Missouri and Texas Tech. I coded with Chance McMillian and Darian Williams playing. They were both ruled out with injuries, and I have them returning. Texas Tech gets a nice uptick and bump for me because I have them close to 100%. If I coded this wrong, or if they're not 100%, it could be a source of downside as well. Kansas and St. John's round out the region, and now we're officially at the round of 32. Since you can see my whole bracket in our pool on ncaa.com, remember the password is capital N, capital G 2025. I'm going to do highlights from each region leading to the Final Four to round out this show. You can see and play against me, and we'll reset with more data as the tournament continues. From the West, I have Florida coming out of this region after beating UConn, Maryland, and then Texas Tech. The Red Raiders over St. John's is in part because of their players being back. That is what I'm talking about. And also, the advantage Rick Pitino adds to St. John's has too many people choosing St. John's, so I'm going to take smart risk by going Texas Tech in a game where it's closer to 50-50 in terms of what the model came out with. From the South, shocker here, Auburn. I have them knocking off Creighton, A&M, and then Michigan State to make it. Perhaps the biggest mistake I'm making in my bracket is having UNC beat Iowa State. It is a lot of risk, and I have a much closer game for Michigan State against Iowa State. It's basically 50-50. So if it's UNC versus MSU, it's like all Izzo's crew. They win by a lot more. If it's Iowa State, Michigan State, it's like 50-50. So you could go Iowa State there and consider that as some smart risk. But again, it's not like super crazy because to me, the one coming out of here, Auburn. From the Midwest, I have the Volunteers. They're the 2 seed, and I have them headed to the Alamo Dome. Houston and Tennessee have nearly identical odds in my model. Tennessee has more volatility, so I'm going with the upside there. Also, I spent far too much time on Clemson and Purdue, which is basically a coin flip. Purdue right now has lost 6 of their last 9 games, which you could read as they're not trending in the right direction. Or you could say maybe they're not properly seeded and they are coming off a Final Four appearance last season. I'm going with glass half full for the Boilermakers here. And from the East, it's Duke. I have Duke. Did you get that from the beginning of the show? Anyways, they have 3 guys who will likely be drafted in the top 10, and they play killer defense. The biggest thorn in their side could be Arizona, and that's the closest game I have for them. If you're looking for a way to just not pick Duke, I would say maybe look at Arizona. It's a smart, risky bet. Anyways, I have Wisconsin beating Bama in this division, though. So that's a whopping 3 seed knocking off a 2. So a little less chalky. No, it's very chalky in that one. Overall, I have Florida topping Duke in the final game. I went with all volatility on that one. I love the first week of the tournament. I think kids should get the Thursday and Friday off of school. We can start lobbying for that later. Don't forget to fill out your bracket, ncaa.com. We'll put all the links everywhere here. Remember, the password is NG2025. And one interesting little housekeeping note, I will not be here next week. We're going to take a 1-week break. I'm actually headed on a service trip to Kenya with the International Justice Mission to help raise awareness and combat human trafficking. As always, thank you so much for hanging out. Enjoy March Madness, especially this weekend. It's the best one. Good luck in all of your pools. I hope you get your bracket completely right. And if you like the show, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and pass it along so we can continue to grow. I'll see you in 2 weeks.